Hey everybody, lesson 2, Abraham Lincoln. You should be watching this on April 15th. I hope that you were able to watch the other videos, that they were easy to click on the link and get you there, and that you were able to complete the assignments. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know and send me an email and I will help you out as best as I can. So there's something I have to take care of legal-wise before I begin our lesson. I apologize that these are backwards to you, but selfie mode, you guys know what that's like. I'll be reading from a couple books, so I have to take care of a legal statement first. This is Abraham Lincoln by Tanya Lee Stone. I'll be reading a little bit from that book today. Some of you were assigned that one in class. And also from this one, Lincoln, a photobiography. This one's by Russell Friedman. So before I begin, acknowledging those books, all the videos, songs, images, texts, and graphics used in this video belong to their respective owners, and I or this channel does not claim any right over them. I wasn't smart enough to write the book. It's just smart enough to read it to you guys. All right, so we're picking up with Abraham Lincoln having moved to Springfield. He was elected to the Illinois State Legislature. I'm going to start with this book and read to you so you can find out where he moved and who he met along the way. So the day Lincoln had arrived in Springfield, April 15th, 1837, was the same day he met Joshua Speed. That's an important name that will be on your test. Lincoln had lived in mostly backwater towns, so Springfield, even with its dirt roads and smattering of log cabins amid the nicer homes, was more cosmopolitan than any place he had ever lived. So we know that Lincoln grew up with no money, and he was very poor, lived in a one-room log cabin with his 3 step-siblings, his sister, and his stepmother and father. So moving to Springfield, he was kind of, moving up in the world to a fancier town, a little fancier than what he was used to. He was still a man with little money and few belongings. Speed and Lincoln became fast friends and lived together in Speed's room above the general store run by Speed. So Joshua Speed owned a general store and was kind enough to offer Lincoln a place to live, and that was in the room that was above the store. In the evenings, Lincoln, Speed, and other men would gather around the fire at Speed's store and trade stories. Speed and Lincoln belonged to the Whig Party, but Speed said at night, 8 or 10 choice spirits assembled without distinction of party. So you're probably familiar with Republicans and Democrats today. Those are the 2 main political parties. Back when Lincoln was alive and during this time period, Whig, W-H-I-G, Whig Party was a major political party, and Speed and Lincoln belonged to the Whig Party. However, at night when those gentlemen would come and hang out, there were men of other political parties, not just the Whigs. They talked about politics, books, and the comings and goings of people in the town. A little gossip. Lincoln was often the life of the party, telling jokes or reading poems. But he didn't always join the group. Sometimes he went off by himself to read or sit quietly and think. So we know that Lincoln has 2 sides. Growing up, he was a good storyteller, a good joke teller, but we also know he had his quiet side where he liked to be alone and he liked to do a lot of reading. So we see that here as an adult too. He's still continuing to, have those same characteristics. People were drawn to Lincoln. Speed said, he did not seek company, it sought him. They came there because they were sure to find Lincoln. So they liked him. People liked him. They wanted to go hang out with him. Lincoln inspired closeness and generosity in his friends and reciprocated when he could, but he was intensely private and did not get too emotionally attached to anyone. Speed was the exception. He became the closest friend of Lincoln's life, and although they did not see each other much in later years, they corresponded often. After Lincoln's death, Speed said, he disclosed his whole heart to me. So Lincoln's a private person. He has, trouble with those close relationships, as you can imagine. He lost his mom when he was 9. He was close to Sarah Bush Johnston Lincoln, his stepmother. Not close with his father, Thomas. We have talked about that. But Speed was his lifetime best friend. There was another man in Springfield at the time with whom Lincoln had a quite different relationship. Stephen A. Douglas was a Democrat. That's a different political party, the opposite of the Whigs, who was quickly becoming Lincoln's main political rival. Douglas was an attorney. The 2 first met in 1834 while both were serving in the legislature. Lincoln and Douglas disagreed strongly on most topics during legislature sessions. The paths of the towering Whig and the short, stocky Democrat would soon be entwined. So what we've got going on now is we've got rivals. Stephen Douglas is about my height short, bigger than I am, pretty plump. And Abraham Lincoln, as you know, is 6 feet 4 inches tall and very, very, very thin. So we kind of have extreme polar opposites, not only with their political beliefs, but as well as their physical stature. I don't know about the Springfield field trip. I don't know. I can't predict what's going to go on with the school being closed, but I can tell you that if and when you ever get up to the old state capitol in Springfield, there is a life-size statue of Stephen Douglas up there. It's interesting to see just how short he was. I mean, you know how tall I am, or short I am, I guess I could say. So you kind of have an idea. But Stephen Douglas is going to become a big part of Lincoln's life in the future. And we'll get to that, a few lessons from now. So we've got Lincoln in Springfield living above Joshua Speed's general store, having met Stephen Douglas and hanging out with friends at night. And now we're going to talk a little about his love life. He also fell in love, apparently for the first time in his life. Legend tells us that Lincoln once had a tragic love affair with Anne Rutledge, daughter of the New Salem tavern owner, who died at the age of 22. While the story has become part of American folklore, there isn't a shred of evidence that Lincoln had ever had a romantic attachment with Anne. Historians believe that they were just good friends. So part of what we have with any kind of historical figure is there's the truth and the facts that can be proved, and then there's kind of those stories that are legend, like, well, we think it happened, but we can't really prove it. We're not quite so sure. The Anne Rutledge thing was one of those things that historians do not accept as fact. They can't prove it, but they suspect that there could have been a relationship there. It is important to note that Anne died at age 22. We know Lincoln's mother died at age when he was 9, and now we have maybe a romantic interest, possibly, who died at a young age as well. While Lincoln was still living in New Salem, he carried on a half-hearted courtship with Mary Owens, but that came to nothing. So in New Salem, he had someone maybe he talked to a little bit and was a little interested in Mary Owens, but never went anywhere. As far as we know, Lincoln never really lost his head over a woman until he met Mary Ann Todd, a very, very important person in his life. You need to know that name. The pampered and the temperamental daughter of a wealthy Kentucky banker. So, Mary Todd is going to end up becoming his wife. Imagine that. So, we're going to move on now to meeting Mary. This is back from this book again. Lincoln enjoyed the camaraderie he found at Speed's. That means the friendship that he found with people at Speed's. But he had yet to meet a young woman who made him feel at ease. That changed in the winter of 1839. Mary Todd was an unlikely match for Lincoln. He was gawky, rough around the edges, and from a poor frontier background. Although he was a rising politician, he still had many unpolished ways about him. Still kind of a country bumpkin. Mary Todd came from a different world. Hers was a wealthy family that kept slaves. The Todd's house was filled with beautiful things, and Mary had been given a good education. She spoke French and liked clothes and fancy parties. She went to Springfield in October 1839 to live with her sister Elizabeth and brother-in-law Ninian Edwards. At their parties, many men had their eye on Mary, including Stephen Douglas. Ninian said, Mary could make a bishop forget his prayers. But Mary liked Abraham instantly. She could see what was special about this awkward man. Mary knew he was destined for greatness. Although different in many ways, Mary and Abraham shared important things. They had both lost their mothers very young, and they both in turn felt somewhat lost in spite of having strong personalities. They both suffered from mood swings. Mary and Abraham shared a deep love of poetry and politics, Mary being quite outspoken for a woman of her time, which will kind of get her in a little bit of trouble and get her talked about and gossiped about later. In fact, Henry Clay often came to dinner at her father's house, and Clay was the politician whose views Lincoln most admired. And Abraham and Mary were both from Kentucky. The two fell in love, and Abraham asked Mary to marry him in the winter of 1840. But just a few weeks later, he changed his mind. He was afraid and confused by his feelings, and he had always had trouble with close relationships. Mentioned again. There is also some evidence that Mary's family was not happy about the engagement, which could have contributed to Lincoln's hesitation. Whatever the reason, breaking off the engagement did not solve Lincoln's problem. He wrote to Stuart, "I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would be not one cheerful face on the earth." Friends even worried that Lincoln might kill himself. About the time Lincoln called off the engagement, Speed moved to Kentucky. Joshua Speed, whose general store he had moved into, or the room above it, his best friend, had moved to Kentucky. So broke off an engagement and has a friend that's moving to another state. Losing his best friend, especially at this time, was a big blow. In August 1841, Lincoln, still in the throes of depression, went to visit Speed. He felt relaxed and at home with the Speed family and began to feel better. He was even able to help with Speed's own fears of marrying the woman he loved. So now Speed's kind of questioning he's getting married too, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to do that." And Lincoln says, "Oh, it'll be all right." And then Speed says, "Oh, well, you'll be all right too." Just as good friends do. Considerably cheered, Lincoln returned to Springfield. So now he's feeling better, not quite so depressed, back in Springfield. Mary had sent a letter to Lincoln to let him know her feelings hadn't changed and that she would hold the question an open one. Indeed, she had been waiting for him for more than a year. Back in Springfield, a mutual friend, Mrs. Simeon Francis, arranged for the couple to meet, and they quietly began to court again. On the night of November 4th, 1842, rain fell against the window panes. But inside the Edwards house, Abraham and Mary were married by the light of beautiful oil lamps and a cozy fire. Lincoln was 33 years old. His bride was 10 years younger. 9 months later, on August 1st, 1843, their first son was born. They named him Robert Todd. For a while, the family rented one room at the Globe Tavern. Then in January 1844, Lincoln bought a house on the corner of 8th and Jackson Streets. They would live there for 17 years. Kind of the point where we're going to stop today. So what we've covered today is that Lincoln moved to Springfield. He was elected, right, as an Illinois state legislator. That was in 1834. And then he moved to Springfield in 1837. He lived above Joshua Speed's general store. There, during that time, he was practicing law with John Todd Stewart. That was his first law partner. So John Todd Stewart owned the law firm, and then Abraham Lincoln went to work for him. Living at Joshua Speed's store, that's where he's met his rival, Stephen Douglas. In 1839, he traveled the 8th Judicial Court. We didn't really talk much about that today. We may get to that in tomorrow's lesson. In 1840, Mary Todd moved to Springfield with her sister, and that's where she met Lincoln. Lincoln was considered backwoods, and Mary was very proper and educated and came from a wealthy family, polar opposites. And then they got engaged. In 1841, Lincoln broke off the engagement with her, went into a depression, and then he ended his law partnership at that time with John Todd Stewart, his first partner, and became partners with Stephen Logan. In 1842, after speaking with his good friend Joshua Speed, who had moved to Kentucky, remember, 15 months later in 1842, he reunited with Mary and married her. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but he did not move back into the one room above Joshua Speed's store. At that time, when he married Mary Todd, they moved to a place called Globe Tavern. And in 1843, their first child was born, and his name was Robert Todd Lincoln. So that's going to be what we cover today. So there will be an assignment with this that you'll need to complete now in Google Classroom. There will be some notes that are attached. Remember that you're going to need these notes, and they're going to need to be available from when you complete your study guide. And you can screenshot them, take a picture of them with your camera, write them down, print them out. Whatever works for you works for me. And we'll pick up where we left off tomorrow. So I'll talk to you guys then. Have a good day.